We are biological hermaphrodites in the evolutionary scheme of life. Interview by Jochim Ehlers. Raum plus Zeit, with Heinrich Kremer, MD, on AIDS and cancer. Raum plus Zeit. Dr. Kremer, you have written a sensational book. Still revolution der AIDS und Krebsmedizin, the silent revolution in AIDS and cancer medicine. First, a question about what AIDS has to do with cancer. Kremer. The appearance of a rare cancer form, Kaposi's sarcoma, was first reported 20 years ago among homosexual patients in their mid-30s. In the USA, this was a sarcoma affecting the inner wall cells of blood and lymph vessels. Other homosexual patients, either with or in most cases without Kaposi's sarcoma, suffered from fungal infections of the lungs and other organs. These were linked to a high fatality rate. Since specific chemoantibiotics proved a failure, most patients developed cachexia, a loss of body cell volume that could not be offset by nutritional means. The common characteristic of these cancer and infection patients was functional loss of the cellular immune defense against intracellular disease pathogens, while the antibody defense against extracellular microbes remained completely intact or even increased. This disease constellation was later called acquired immune deficiency syndrome or AIDS. It was noticeable that this combination of symptoms occurred in exactly the same manner among patients with organ transplants who had been treated since the 1960s with a immunosuppressive agent azathioprine to prevent rejection of foreign organs. Thus the link between cancer and induced cellular immunodeficiency, AIDS, was known to physicians in 1981. Raum plus Zeit. Yet the clinicians reported at the time that previously healthy AIDS patients had not been treated by immunosuppressive measures. Kremer. These diagnoses were correct superficially, but they were far removed from reality. Up to the present, these erroneous diagnoses have led to one of the most absurd mistakes in modern medicine, and one resulting in the most serious consequences. Due to the completely identical symptoms, it would have been absolutely logical to ask if substances with immunosuppressive agents and a cell toxicity action profile analogous to azathioprine could have been the cause of AIDS, before having announced the appearance of a new fatal sex and blood epidemic. One would naturally have had to search for substances that had not been medically prescribed for immune system suppression, such as in the case of organ transplants. Raum plus Zeit. Were there any such substances? Kremer. Yes. Addiction to poppers among homosexuals was rife in the metropolises of the USA and Europe during the 1970s. It involved inhalation of nitrogen gases as sexual doping agents for sphincter muscle relaxation during anal sexual intercourse, and for extended penis erection. Nitrogen gases, amyl nitrite, and other agents were found in animal experiments to be extremely dangerous immunosuppressive substances. Anyone can read in medical publications on the first AIDS patients that they were all nitrite users. Nitrites and the aza group of azathioprine have a comparable nitrogen action profile. The substances groups form nitrosopiols and nitrosamines and inhibit fermentation activity in the respiratory organisms of our cells, the mitochondria. The result is blockage of oxygen-dependent cell respiration. The cells die or transfer to energy preparation typical of cancer cells through fermentation independent of oxygen. Numerous studies during the 1970s also demonstrated that promiscuous gay men had by far the highest infection occurrence among all risk groups in the USA and Europe. Since 1969, the chemoantibiotic Septrum, that contains the substance trimethoprim as well as a sulfonamide, has been viewed as a wonder weapon against multi-infectious incidents. Promiscuous homosexuals were the risk group with the greatest consumption of Septrum, according to a statement by the world's greatest Septrum producer, the Swiss pharmaceutical concern Hoffmann La Roche. The drug is regarded as one of the most successful substances that has ever been developed. In reality, Septrum is one of the most dangerous substances. It is prescribed for more than 5% of the population each year, due to the structural analogy of the nitrogen action profile for azathioprine and trimethoprim. The immunosuppressive characteristics of trimethoprim had already been tested on animals in England during 1970. The result was absolutely clear. Trimethoprim, given in comparable doses as Septrum, treatment among human beings, prevented rejection of skin transplants precisely as long as azathioprine. It was proved in 1971 that one of the most common AIDS indicator illnesses, systematic candida fungus infections, appeared after Septrum treatment taken according to the usual dosage and length of prescription. It was demonstrated in 1981 that Septrum caused massive DNA damage in human cells immediately after a brief intake period at the outset of the 1980s. One administered antibiotics such as Septrum, along with nitrogen gases in animal experiments. It developed cancer. Raum plus Zeit. Were the necessary conclusions drawn from these findings? Kremer: absolutely not. Although the causes of AIDS were obvious, the gay male AIDS and cancer illnesses were explained as a mystery. Instead, it was postulated that there had to be a new virus causing the illnesses. Otherwise, one would have had to reckon on a pharmaceutical catastrophe with unforeseeable consequences. There were parallels in medical history. During the 1960s, a massive outbreak of muscular and nerve damage with high mortality appeared in Japan and was viewed as mysterious. Virus researchers maintained they had discovered a new virus as the cause of these illnesses. This disease theory was accepted worldwide in all medical textbooks. Years later, a few physicians noted that all these patients suspected to be infected by viruses had been treated with the enteroviroform preparation from the Swiss pharmaceutical concern Cibagigi. The preparation was withdrawn from commerce after liability suits, and no new cases of the disease appeared. The new virus had never existed. The anti-parasite agent enteroviroform also had an action profile toxic to mitochondria similar to azathioprine, Septrum, nitrites, etc. Raum plus Zeit. In your book you document in detail that previous theories on the causes of disease and death involving AIDS and cancer are basically false. Why do virus cancer researchers dominate AIDS research to this day? Kremer: a crucial clinical phenomena surfaced in cases of Kaposi cancer patients with organ transplants. If azathioprine was discontinued, even tumors the size of chicken eggs receded without leaving a trace. This fact strictly contradicted the cancer theory dominating up to the present that cancer is triggered by an irreparable mutation of the DNA nucleus and that cancerous tumors can only be combated by operations, chemotherapy, and radiation. Transformation to the cancer cells is regarded as irreversible. The disappearance of azathioprine-induced Kaposi sarcoma among organ transplant patients endangered the theoretical structure of the profitable cancer industry. In 1971 then, U.S. President Nixon called for a war against cancer, and set in motion the greatest capital investment in medical history up to that point in time. It was primarily retrovirus cancer researchers who profited from this, though they have been totally unsuccessful to this day. The appearance of Kaposi cancer among homosexuals and patients with immune systems weakened by toxic drugs brought the retrovirus cancer researchers to a simple but extremely viable idea from a commercial standpoint. As in Japan, laboratory techniques had been developed in order to fake the existence of retroviruses that one could indeed demonstrate with electron microscopy in birds and mice but never in human cancer cells. Researchers bred immune cells, which were reduced in the blood of AIDS patients, alongside leukemia cancer cells, in